follistatin gene therapy. It costs you $25,000. The gene therapy lasts for about a year to two. Biggest disruptors to sleep as people age that they can't get through an entire night without having to get up to urinate. Polycystic kidney disease, that is an inherited disease. Akkermansia basically colonizes the whole intestinal mucosa. We're probably fooling ourselves if we think that just you do this detox, everything's gone, because you're going to get exposed to it the next day. So you have to really be.
Welcome to our Q&A highlights. Q&A sessions are recorded every month, and our enhanced members get an exclusive opportunity to ask questions from one of cellular medicine's brightest minds, Dr. Elizabeth Yurth. Get a chance to ask your questions by becoming our enhanced member at bli.academy/memberships. You also get access to our content library full of tips, articles, videos, lectures, previous live Q&A sessions, and more.
I think there may be some benefit to some types of detoxes, but overall, I don't use detoxes a lot. But I do think there's ways to do detoxes just on an ongoing basis. For instance, glyphosates. I test for glyphosates in a lot of patients, and everybody ends up positive for glyphosates. Humic and fulvic acid are really good at detoxing out some of the glyphosates that we're exposed to and some of the other chemicals that we're exposed to in the organophosphates that we're exposed to. If you look at things like arsenic, lead, mercury, arsenic rampant in rice. If you're a rice eater at all, likely you're getting some exposure to arsenic. It's in a lot of tea. So those of you who are big tea drinkers, there's a lot of arsenic in tea. If you eat fish, you are likely going to have mercury, even if you're doing wild-caught salmon. It is very hard to get away from mercury. So I use some zeolites. I use one called Natural Cellular Defense, or NCD. It's a little liquid zeolites. But basically, zeolites are these minerals that occur when volcanic ash hits water. It forms this cage-like crystal. It basically is a negatively charged inside, so it can attract small positively charged molecules like arsenic and lead and mercury. But it's not going to get rid of things like magnesium and calcium, those good things we need. We're probably fooling ourselves if we think that just you do this detox, everything's gone, because you're going to get exposed to it the next day. So you have to really be thinking ongoing. If you already have really good glucose control and you're eating really well, your diet's pristine, you have good body comp, everything else is good, and you still have this high fasting insulin. Well, it's never okay, but I will tell you to remember that there's a lot of other things that spike insulin, such as high cortisol, low-grade inflammation from something. There's a chronic virus in there, maybe there's a herpes virus or Epstein-Barr virus that's creating a chronic inflammatory process that's stressing your body. Sleep apnea, intense exercise. So if you're an intense exerciser, you may have higher insulin levels, and that may be an overtraining sign in some cases. PCOS will raise insulin levels. So think about things that are not food, diet related. But is it a sign that you're developing insulin resistance? Yes. High insulin is not a good thing. And so you need to look at what the cause is. I would look, in my life, stress is a big one. Cortisol is a big one. So you have to look at that. You have to look at sleep. Those are big pieces. So this is a huge problem, right? Because I know a lot of you, as you get older, you have to get up at night to pee. And every time you get up at night to pee, it takes you, at least a few minutes to fall back asleep. So it disrupts sleep. So if you look at one of the biggest disruptors to sleep as people age in both men and women, it is that they can't get through an entire night without having to get up to urinate. And it's a problem. Why doesn't that happen when we're young? Well, there's a few things. Number one is hormones. So first and foremost, you optimize hormones, because in both sexes, you have to have enough estrogen, enough progesterone, because that's going to help to keep, it's actually, we'll talk about what's called vasopressin, but it's going to help keep vasopressin levels more normal. So you have to optimize hormones. It also will make the bladder healthier to have more estrogen on board. The biggest factor that plays a role here is a little bit more out of your control, and that's a decrease in something called vasopressin, or what's called antidiuretic hormone, ADH. If I get this decrease in antidiuretic hormone, so low antidiuretic hormone, diuresis, I have to pee a lot. This chemical that you form at night from the brain tells your kidneys to stop producing as much urine at night, so we don't have to pee. Cholesterol is not a bad thing. In fact, Dr. Dan Goodnow, has looked at some research or done some research looking at brain volume size compared to cholesterol. More cholesterol, bigger brains. We know that cholesterol is really, really, really important. And when you push it too low, we can't make hormones, we can't make vitamins, our brains get smaller. So we really need cholesterol. But we need the right type of cholesterol for lipids to become a problem in my blood vessel, they first have to be damaged. There has to be inflammatory process going on, and they have to be activated by macrophages that basically eat them and they get digested by what are called foam cells. And that's what makes plaque. So it's not until there's inflammation going on that the lipids really become a problem. When you look at things like metabolic control, glucose and insulin, well, high insulin is a cause of inflammation. Your doc may consider normal insulin up to 25. We consider it greater than 6 abnormal. And we know that that's leading to more inflammation. So if I have high insulin levels and I have a high ApoB, I'm going to be in more trouble because I have a low-grade chronic inflammatory state. So our goal would be polycystic kidney disease. You can't prevent the disease because it is a genetic disease. It is an inherited disease. And if you have it, you have it. But could we prevent progression to kidney failure, which happens in almost everybody, if not everybody at some point, who has polycystic kidney disease? So one of my first go-tos for protecting kidneys in both polycystic kidney disease and in other kidney diseases was what we call the sodium glucose cotransporter, or SGLT2 inhibitors. But much like the GLP-1 agonists, they have a host of other benefits for longevity. There's an interesting compound, triptolide. Triptolide has a really long history in Chinese medicine. And it was shown in polycystic kidney disease, and it's used in China for this purpose to have significant reduction in the rate of cyst growth and improvement in renal function. And then lastly, and this is going to be something that will be advantageous for all of us in our longevity quest, is something called clotho-protein. It's a protein that some people make a lot of. So if you have a clothos gene and you make a lot of clothos protein, you have an advantage to longevity. But clothos protein is also very beneficial to kidney function, and especially potentially in polycystic kidney disease. There's these 20,000 some nerve cells that make up the suprachiasmatic nucleus. And each of those little neurons in the suprachiasmatic nucleus keeps time. But because they're different cells, they all have slightly different rhythms. Some go a little fast, some go a little slower. And so it's kind of like this weird, this population in your suprachiasmatic nucleus with each cell is in a little bit of a different order. And so they have to kind of all agree with each other on the time of day in order to kind of coordinate this daily rhythm of alertness and metabolism. What do you think is the best way to strengthen bones for women in their 70s? This is from Patrice. You know this, Patrice. Hormones, nutrients, D3, K2, magnesium, lots of protein, load-bearing exercise, weightlifting, okay? If we have to go to drugs, we like the peptide-based therapies, such as teriparatide. Teriparatide is Tymlos or Forteo. Those are the way our body replaces bone. So if I go to drugs, I do not do the bisphosphonates. I recommend Tymlos or Forteo, which are teriparatide. It's a peptide. We used to be able to get a compound that we can't anymore. Akkermansia, basically it's gram-negative bacteria that is in the mucus layer of the gut. And so it basically colonizes the whole intestinal mucosa of humans and rodents. And it has a knack for breaking down this kind of sugary protein called mucin and making the gut mucosa much healthier. And that's probably very, very, very important to our health. So people who have higher levels of Akkermansia seem to have better health, particularly better metabolic control. But it's also been linked low levels to inflammatory bowel diseases, obesity, very linked to diabetes, cholesterol, glucose management in general, even if you don't have diabetes. Follistatin drops as we age. And follistatin is basically naturally occurring in the human body, plays a role in inflammation and reproduction. So it has a lot of value, but it also acts as sort of a secret in the bodybuilding community. It acts to block myostatin. So myo, muscle, statin, stop. So myostatin is another hormone in our body that stops muscle growth, right? And we don't want to just keep getting massive, right? So our body has this check and balance method. So it turns up myostatin when, to kind of block too much muscle formation. But the problem is this balance between follistatin and myostatin. But as we get older, our follistatin levels start dropping, our myostatin levels start increasing. So it's much, much harder to put on muscle. This starts actually at a relatively young age, even in 20s. You'll start to see after kind of reproductive age. So in the early mid-20s, a little bit later for men than women, you'll start to see this imbalance occur. So follistatin kind of has gotten a lot of play, not only for its muscle building properties, but because it has so many other longevity inducing properties. And so Liz Parrish, who runs company MiniCircle, and they've been working a lot with gene therapies, has a follistatin gene therapy. It costs you $25,000. The gene therapy lasts for about a year to two, so max 2. Most people probably got 18 months. So if you have the money, $25,000 for 18 months of really improving the follistatin level. So you bring your follistatin levels up. If I can bring them up higher, it's going to block myostatin. I'm going to be able to put on muscle better, but I'm also just going to feel better and feel healthier. And it works quite well. You can see increasing in follistatin levels. It's expensive. Do I think there might be other ramifications of it? I think we're early. I don't trust everything at this stage in the game when I'm doing gene therapies. So, I think there's some caution there. I also don't have the finances to spend $25,000 a year on this. So what will I do? This is what I do to raise my follistatin and block my myostatin. One of the things is exercising in a fasted state. If you exercise in a fasted state, you will markedly inhibit myostatin.